We can hear you, doctor. Yeah.
Hope it is
Go ahead.
visible now.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the drop attacks. It is not so frequent. It is only found in 49%, not 49% of 602 people with Meniere's disease. It was a survey. And you should be aware that drop attacks is not exclusive for this Meniere's alone. We can see it in seizures, which is commonly seen, circulatory issues or heart attack. Likewise, we all for all these type of attacks, drop attacks. So now coming to the second most important symptom of Meniere's is tinnitus aurea. Tinnitus aurea. So what is tinnitus? It is like the sensation of sound which is perceived by the patient and it originates within himself. So the patients may be saying many types of sounds, like somebody may be saying it is like whistling, somebody may be saying buzzing. These are the two common types of sound which we see in our clinics usually. The other types are less common variety. And for buzzing rubric, we are having many medicines in our repertoire, right? So whenever the patient is mentioning of tinnitus, you ask whether there is any associated deafness symptom with it or it is coming without any deafness. So if it is coming without deafness, most commonly it is due to anemia or it is a psychological cause is there or sometimes there may be stress and cardiovascular disease. These are all the causes without deafness. Most commonly it will be with deafness. With deafness is again divided into subjective and objective. In subjective, we can see there is a pathological disturbance of the cells of the organ of Corti, like senile deafness. Senile deafness, you can get tinnitus. Ototoxicity, again drug-induced, noise trauma. We have to differentiate all these things in case of if the deafness is due to, if the tinnitus is due to Meniere's or not. And the physiological distortion of Hassel, that is the Meniere's, and CNS and neural disorders, an auditory nerve tumor. It can cause tinnitus. So you have to go for an MRI if you suspect these conditions. Next is objective tinnitus. Objective tinnitus is rare and it is due to alteration of sound conduction, vascular pathology or clonic contraction of the middle ear muscles. So tinnitus may be present during the first attack of Meniere's, and it is not like that tinnitus precedes vertigo. Tinnitus is always associated with a vertigo attack, and it is like hearing impairment, which it will come only may precede the vertigo attack, but tinnitus always comes with the vertigo attack. So during the vertigo attack, there may be nystagmus. Nystagmus is the movement of the eyeballs. That also we don't observe in our settings because the patient will be coming, usually the patient will be coming with the symptoms of Meniere's and they will be mostly on vertigo. And so we cannot observe the nystagmus, although we can elicit it with some tests. And the patient may be saying like there is intolerance to carbohydrate diet or diabetes or something like that. And next is the hearing impairment. Hearing impairment is the next important symptom in Meniere's disease. Here you can see audiometrically documented low to medium frequency hearing loss. You have to see that the sensory neural hearing loss, which is typical present in Meniere's disease, is for low frequency sounds. And it can also affect the middle and high frequencies after several episodes. As we have already mentioned, with every episode of vertigo, there is some diminution in the hearing, and it can lead to pantonal hearing loss later. This we have already mentioned, like hearing loss may progress. So how we can measure the hearing loss? How we can measure this hearing loss? It's a question like how we can measure it in clinic, how we can measure it with some lab investigations. So generally, we go for an audiometry. So there are different types of audiometry. Whenever you are prescribing for a Meniere's disease investigation, you have to go for the pure tone audiometry. Pure tone audiometry, in which you will be hearing some sounds from a machine of different frequencies. You will be having different frequencies, 0 to 100, 120 decibels will be there. You will be hearing these sounds and you should respond whether you are hearing or not. And this will be plotted on a graph like this. and this will be plotted, and from this graph we will be identifying whether you are having this deafness or not, and if deafness is present, what type of deafness you are suffering from. Okay, so this is a subjective test. See, here the patient is responding to the sound. So this is the different degrees of hearing loss that is normal to profound. Usually a person hears between the 0 to 10 decibel. This is a normal whispering sound. Okay, whisper chamber केकना sound. This is a profound hearing loss. Profound hearing loss, the patient is hearing nothing. So our graph should be somewhere between 0 to 20 or between 10 to 15. Here it should be there. Our graph should be like this. Before going into the normal graph, we'll see what is the degrees of hearing loss. So 0 to 15 decibel is within normal limits. This is within normal limits, 0 to 15. 16 to 25 slight, here mild, moderately severe, and plus 90 plus decibel it is profound hearing loss. Here this is not a normal audiogram. I'll explain it. So this is a normal audiogram. Here you can see every physician can write for an audiometry audiogram in your clinics or OPD settings. Just you have to write it pure tone audiometry or simply audiometry. And you can see you will be getting a graph like this. It is very easy to interpret this graph. Very easy to interpret once you know this thing. See, the red stands for right ear, blue stands for left ear. And air conduction, it is a circle for right ear, a cross for left ear. Bone conduction, it is a open bracket for right ear and a closed bracket for left ear. This is the most basic symbols which are used in audiogram. So once you understand these symbols clearly, you can interpret what is mentioned in the audiogram. See, everybody may not be mentioning what is the exact pathology, exact type of deafness, or how much degree of deafness there is there in the audiogram. But you can definitely see, like we can even measure whether, interpret whether there is a deafness or not. See, on seeing this audiogram, can you say like this is the right ear and this is the left ear, and both the hearing is almost, both the ears are hearing at the same level almost. There are no brackets here. So the bone conduction is not tested. Only the air conduction is tested, right? And the patient is hearing between 0 to 10. Is it clear? Okay, the graph is in the higher level, right? And so the audiogram is normal. So once you're getting a patient with this type of audiogram, you can say that the patient is having normal hearing limits. So he is not deaf or hearing impaired. Now we'll see another graph. Here you can see this is the right ear, this is the left ear. See the difference between right and left ear? There is a gap. There is a gap, airborne gap is there. 25 to 50 decibel gap is there. Then bone conduction. Here you can see the bone conduction. It is somewhat higher than the air conduction and it is normal also. So here the patient is having conductive deafness. For having conductive deafness, or in order to identify conductive deafness, there should be a gap, ABG gap. This we say ABG gap. Okay, and this gap should be there. If this gap is there, you can say that it is conductive deafness. In conductive deafness, you know that it is due to a defect in the conducting mechanism. That's a common sense. It can be an impacted cerumen, can be a perforated tympanic membrane. It can be like a CSOM, like perforated tympanic membrane, medullary pathology, or any disease which is affecting the small bones, autosclerosis, something like that. It can be there. That is a conductive hearing loss. So in CSOM, ASOM and all, you will be finding this conductive hearing loss alone. Okay. Now coming to the sensory neural hearing loss, it is due to the problems with cochlea or the inner ear. Here you can see that the graph is going down. This is a typical appearance in sensory neural hearing loss. The airborne gap is not there, but you can see that the graph is going down. This is typical of sensory neural hearing loss. So in brief, this is a sensory neural hearing loss. This is the conductive hearing loss, and this is mixed. Why? There is a slow as well as there is a gap. So this is a severe, moderately severe to profound mixed hearing loss. So what is the significance of audiogram in our prescription, our patient care? So you'll be having a value in this. You'll be having a value like pure tone audiometry at 40 decibels for right ear or 50 decibels for left ear. So after giving medicines for 6 months, you can repeat the audiogram and see whether this graph is going up, whether there is an improvement, whether the value is going to 30 or 20 like that. So you'll be getting two values here. That is the importance of audiometry, so that we can identify whether it is improving or not. Because hearing is something which patients may not be agreeing with. Even though they may be having some improvement, they may not be agreeing with the idea that they are having some improvement with the hearing. So you have to go for an audiometry if there is severe hearing impairment at least once in 6 months. So that's all regarding the clinical features. Now the diagnosis. So once you understand the clinical features, the diagnosis is very easy, because in Meniere's disease, the diagnosis is based on the clinical symptoms alone. And not only clinical symptoms, as we have already mentioned, some tests are there. We'll be mentioning it in detail. And the thing is, now the physicians tend to overdiagnose it due to the lack of a standard test for diagnosis. Although there are many tests for diagnosis, it is not unique to Meniere's disease. And most of the cases which we are seeing in our OPD may not be Meniere's at all. So, but we are overdiagnosing it. And that is one reason that we are not getting an exact value for the prevalence of Meniere's disease. Okay. And thirdly, it is mentioned like it is a committee disease. Why a committee disease? There are many diseases which are
Dr. Vinita, we can't hear you. Please check your audio. Dr. Vinita, we can't hear you. Dr. Vinita,
be there, and they will be
we can't hear
formulating
you,
some-
doctor. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. In between, your audio is disconnecting, doctor. Please check it out. Yeah. Now we can hear you.
Is it? Okay, I was talking about committee disease. Was it audible for you? Hello?
Yeah. Go ahead, doctor. Yeah.
Okay. So, every researcher or a student who is interested in this Meniere's disease should understand what is the diagnostic criteria for Meniere's disease. Goes by you can read and everything. It is all diagnostic published in the journal which is proposed in 2015. They are classifying Meniere's into two: definitive Meniere's disease and probable Meniere's disease. Because all the patients are not presenting with every symptoms we are expecting in a Meniere's. So they have proposed two classification: definitive and probable. So we have to see whether the patient coming to us is a definitive case or a probable case. Okay. So here the patient was in definitive. There will be two or more episodes. You should see it should not be a single episode. It should be a two or more episode of vertigo, and it should last at least 20 minutes and up to 12 hours. And there should be an audiometrically documented low to medium frequency hearing loss. Sometimes the hearing loss may be minimal sensory neural hearing loss in the beginning of the disease, as we have seen already in the pathophysiology, but it can progress to higher frequencies, higher extent also. Then fluctuating oral symptoms in the affected ear. This means like the patients always complain of a sensation of fullness in the affected ear, or it like they mention it like tinnitus. And it is not better accounted by other vestibular disorders. This we have to rule out all the DDs which are caused by Meniere's. Okay. Like we have to rule out a schwannoma. That we can rule out by MRI, like this. But this requires an expert ENT opinion. Only an ENT physician can do this type of diagnosis. And was supposed to do, because we have to rule out all the other vestibular disorders which are supposed to cause these sort of group of symptoms. And probable, the next is probable. This we can do. This is within NAS code. That is, we are having 2 or more episodes of vertigo dizziness and last 30 minutes, 24 hours. And fluctuating oral symptoms in the affected ear like feeling of fullness or tinnitus and not better accounted by other vestibular disorders. Sorry. Here also we need a ENT physician. The thing is here we don't have an audiometrically documented sensory neural hearing loss. So audiometry is not mandatory here because every person who are coming to us may not be billing for audiometry. They may not be doing the audiometry, even though they may be doing it at the baseline at the beginning of treatment. And if they are having the relief of symptoms after 3 months of treatment, which we actually see in our clinical settings, they may not be coming for a second audiometry. That is the practical difficulty. So if we are not having a second audiometry, we can go for probable Meniere disease. There is no issue, the diagnosis. See, what I have mentioned is audiometry, it is a setting, which we need a setting for audiometry. It is done by an audiometrician. So how we can diagnose this hearing impairment in a clinical setting? Like it is done by a tuning fork test. Excuse me. So tuning fork is, you already know we have different frequencies of tuning fork, and in that 5 frequencies is the most important one. Okay, so how this test is done, because it's a very easy test which you can do in your clinical setting. Give me a minute. This is the 512 frequency tuning fork. Okay, here it is written the frequency here. Am I audible?
Yeah, audible, doctor, but you're sharing.
You can see the 512 frequency tuning fork here, right?
Yeah.
See, you can have it in your clinical setting with 512 frequency, this tuning fork, and what you have to do is vibrate the tuning fork and ask the patient to indicate whether this sound is audible or not. So I'll have a demonstration with my JRF, Dr. Divya Babu. See, you have to hold the tuning fork like this. You have to strike the tuning fork so that some vibrations are heard. You can hear the vibrations. Some sort of vibration will be heard, and ask the patient to say whether the sound is audible or not. Is it audible? Yes. Yes. Now Dr. Divya can hear the sound, and there will be a time when the sound stops. See, I have kept the tuning fork like this without touching the ear and at some sort of distance, and this indicates the air conduction. This is the air conduction. So the sound is going through the external orbiculum symbolic membrane dorsal chain to the inner ear. Right. Now I am going to test that. Sorry, this is the Rene's test. R-I-N-E-E. Rene's test, and we say it as air conduction, for air conduction. Now this is the, I will ask whether the patient is the person is hearing the vibration. So this is a vibration, and keeping the tuning fork like this on the mastoid process. Did you hear any voice? Yes. The voice was there, the vibration was there, but the duration will be less than the air conduction. So that is the normal, R positive. AC should be greater than BC. Air conduction should be greater than BC. So the right ear hearing, right ear the patient is having normal reading. The person is having normal reading, R positive. Now we are going to do another test in which we keep the tuning fork on the forehead. Now we'll ask the patient whether she is hearing any vibration or some sort of sound, whether it is hearing in whether it is heard in one ear or both the ear, or whether it is heard in the center of the head. In the center of the head, right? So it is not localized to any ear. The sound is heard in the center of the head. Some sort of vibrations are felt in the center of the head. So the Weber is not, this test is known as the Weber's test. Weber is not localized to any ear, but it is heard in the center of the head alone. So the person is having normal hearing as per this Tulip-Form test. So this is a preliminary test which every person can do in a normal clinical setting. So what happens in conductive hearing losses? Hope you can see my screen now.
Yeah, doctor, we can see.
So we have learned what is air conduction and bone conduction, right? In bone conduction, the sound is through the cochlear, auditory nerve and central connections. Bone conduction, whereas air conduction is through the air and tympano-ossicular chain. Now, Renee, this is a normal, as we have seen in the demonstration, AC is greater than BC, R is positive. Whereas in conductive hearing loss, AC is less than BC. The conduction is not happening properly. So the AC is less than BC or R negative. When we are getting AC less than BC, we have to measure the time with a stopwatch or something like that. And if you're getting R negative, we can say that the person is having a conductive hearing loss in that ear. And next we can go for an audiometry or further investigations. Whereas in sensory neural hearing loss, R is positive, but it is of low volume and short duration. It is of low volume and short duration. The sound is of low volume when we keep it in the BC part. Then Weber's test. Weber's test, what is the interpretation? Like if it is a case of conductive deafness, we have seen that sometimes suppose that the person was not hearing properly in the right ear and his AC was less than BC in the right ear, that is his Renee is negative. And when we are doing the Weber's test, the sound will be, the vibration will be lateralized to the right ear only. That is, the Weber's test will confirm that there is conductive deafness in the right ear. So it is a confirmatory test for conductive deafness. Sound will be lateralized to the left ear. Whereas in the sensory neural hearing loss, the sound will be lateralized to the better ear. You can hear better in the better ear. The sound will be lateralized to the better ear. So once you practice this in 10 patients, you will be very familiar with this test and you can routinely use this test to diagnose whether the patient is having deafness or not. Because there are so many cases coming with that subjective sensation of deafness. So you can use this test easily in our settings. Now, we are now coming to the proper test for Meniere's disease. I'll have a short description of all the tests we are doing. Since it is a webinar, I need to discuss all the tests. Anyway, I'll be going fast through these tests. And electronystagmography. As we have already seen that there is a nystagmus which is happening in Meniere's disease, acute vertigo attacks. So there is an instrument to measure this nystagmus and it is known as electronystagmography. Next is the glycerol test. All this should be done by competent persons only. So glycerol test, it is, so we have mentioned like this is due to enterolymphatic hydrops, right? There is a fluid built up in the inner ear. So what we are doing here is we are introducing a hypertonic solution. Hypertonic solution will extract liquid from the tissues as from the enterolymphatic space also. So for the time being, this enterolymphatic pressure is diminished and all the symptoms are diminished and hearing and vestibular epithelium recovers from the increased pressure. And it happens 2.5 hours after the ingestion. Okay, and it is only transient. That is known as the glycerol test. The next is the brainstem evoked response audiometry. That is a BERA test, and it is usually done in children because they are not able to describe subjectively, like whether they are hearing the sounds in audiogram or not. So it is a mandatory test which is done in pediatric population whenever the patients are complaining of some sort of hearing impairment in the children. Okay, and here it is not mandatory, although it is mentioned here, to rule out the retrocochlear etiology. There are different types of wave we can identify in a BERA. and the different waves indicate which pathology, what may be the probable pathology behind this hearing loss. Electrocochleography is another method for recording the electrical potentials of cochlea. I'm not going into the detail. Then caloric test. It is also a useful clinical tool that can assess and quantify the functional status of the individual vestibular apparatus. So here, caloric test, we are introducing the fluid into the external auditory canal. Okay, and we are measuring the. So there are many recent advances.
Doctor.
Hello.
Yeah, doctor.
Hello.
In between your
Hello. Am I
voice
audible, Dr. Chesney?
yeah, yeah.
Am I audible?
Now it is audible. But in between, your
Okay.
audio is going down. Please check it.
Okay. Delayed MRI. Delayed MRI after intravenous or intratympanic injection. These are all the modern techniques. These are not practically used. Just for the information I am saying, no surgeons are preferring these type of diagnosis. They are diagnosing it based on the clinical evidence as well as the MRI of the brain, if needed. If only it is needed. This is another test, another advancement analysis of wideband tympanometry. This is tympanometry. You can refer the patients for tympanometry also. It is a useful test to rule out middle pathology. So tympanogram may be normal tympanogram is A. So if you are getting an A-type tympanogram, then there is no middle pathology. You can rule out middle pathology. So here we'll have diagnosis in short. The typical rotatory vertigo you have to see, vomiting with fluctuating deafness and tinnitus, and you have to do an otoscopy in every case of auditory case. Whenever you are suspecting any symptoms of related to hearing, you just go for an otoscopy. That we can do it in our clinic also. Hand otoscope is there. When you visualize it in tympanic membrane, you just look into the, you will be seeing the external auditory canal. You can see whether there is any infection, external otitis is there, or some discharge is there, or some wax collection is there. Sometimes the hearing loss may be simply due to the impacted cervix, which we can remove and the hearing will be within normal. Sometimes there may be otalgia, and upon examination we can see some fungal presence of fungus or automycosis or something like that. And there will be a history of entry of water into air after swimming or like that. We have to correlate with all the possible symptoms, all the symptoms which we can collect from the patient. So otoscopy helps a lot in diagnosis, and we can have it in our locally settings also. And tuning fork test, as we have mentioned already, in Puritan audiometry, we can get it done by a this audiometrician. And recruitment test, ABLP and CC. These CC you can write it to an audiometrician, and this help in better diagnosis of cochlear deafness, and it is somewhat more sensitive than PTA in minims. Then, as we mentioned earlier, by caloric test, electromystechmography. Now, blood sugar you have to check because diabetes has to be ruled out. Some diabetic patients, it has a comorbid condition in minims, as well as this carbohydrate intolerance is seen in some patients with minims. So, hope all the participants are awake now. Is anybody sleeping over there? So I want to show you a small video over here. See, there is no specialization in ENT, in homeopathy. So during our PG, we had the opportunity to start a specialty in our college with the support of our professors and goodwill staff. And I am an alumni of Padya Memorial College, and where I had the learn from eminent persons who had vast experience in treating many disorders. Okay, and this was the batch which started the first ENT OPD in Government Homeopathic Medical College, Trivandrum. And this was our Superintendent beloved Daisy ma'am, and she was with us for everything, supporting us like anything for the OPD. And And you see, any endeavor which requires some fruitful outcome, it is not a single person's act, it is not a one person act, it is a group effort. We have done it with the help of the support of lot of persons. All these persons you are seeing in this video is like they have contributed their own part in this OPD. Okay. So that's it. Hope all of you are awake by this time. So that's what I was trying to say. There is no specialization in homeopathy in particular subjects apart from pediatrics, practice of medicine, psychiatry, and all. We don't have any specialty in ENT or ophthalmology or something like that. But if we have to learn in depth on any subject, we need to have an in-depth knowledge in a particular subject. We need to have some specializations like this. And I had the opportunity to work in this ENT setup in Government Homeopathic Medical College in Trivandrum, which is the first of its kind in homeopathic sector in Kerala. Okay, now going on to the differential diagnosis. The first diagnosis is vestibular migraine itself. So this is mostly overlapping with the Meniere's disease. Most of the patients who are coming with Meniere's, some of the patients, I am not saying most of the patients, some of the patients who are coming with Meniere's are also complaining of this migraine attacks also. So migraine attacks associated with hearing loss, tinnitus, oral pressure, sometimes they'll be telling like this also, like oral pressure is there. Okay, and it is often bilateral. Like hearing loss in migraine is bilateral, whereas in Meniere's, as we have already mentioned, it starts unilateral. Okay. Now, there is some pathophysiological relation between this vestibular migraine and Meniere's disease, but we are unable to identify that. It's not clear what is the pathophysiology. And in our settings, we are having one case of this vestibular migraine along with this Meniere's disease symptoms, which is treated with Natramur, and she is doing well since 2.5 years. So there are several diagnostic criteria for diagnosing whether it is a case of vestibular migraine or whether it is a case of definitive or probable. All these are available in literature. So what is the area of your interest? You can choose and fix the diagnosis of your case according to these diagnostic criteria. I'm not going into the details of these criteria. Okay. Vestibular neuronitis, we have already mentioned, it is viral infection of the vestibular nerve. Since it is an acute respiratory tract infection and that is a transient, it will go off by itself after some time, and hearing is within normal limits. Vestibular schwannoma, we can identify it with an MRI, also presents with similar symptoms. Then endolymphatic sac tumor. Here also we can have hearing loss, tinnitus, vertigo, and facial paralysis will also be there. Then autoimmune disease, it is a very, rare condition. If we are not having any other symptoms which is evident from any other laboratory investigations or MRI or something like that, we can attribute it to autoimmune disease, in which there will be a progressing sensory neural hearing loss. The patient will be going into a state of complete deafness sometimes. Then transient ischemic attacks, so stroke, and sometimes it can also present with symptoms of dizziness, hearing loss, tinnitus, likewise. Then benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. This is a common thing which we are unable to distinguish between this, whether it is a Meniere's or a B2PV. So here we can see that it is sudden onset of vertigo, and it doesn't last up to more than 20 minutes, and it occurs in a particular position, and there is no hearing loss. So the diagnosis is easy. Then chronic subjective dissonance, which is all sometimes present in older patients. Chronic subjective dissonance is also sometimes confused with Meniere's. So I have kept this slide because managing life with Meniere's. Today the scientific community has taken the Meniere's with such a, what we have seen in the earlier video, that it is a lifelong chronic condition in which the patient has to adapt to live with Meniere's. But what we have seen in our clinical setting is the patients are getting better within a period of 3 months. And we have followed up cases for up to 2 years with no attacks of vertigo, and the patients are driving, they are living a healthy life likewise. So this is what is done in modern system, I mean the conventional medicines, what they are giving is they are giving some therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy in order to reduce stress and likewise, okay, lifestyle habits and all. So in this scenario, it is we can understand the importance of homeopathy in the treatment of Meniere's disease. So whenever you are going for repetization, you can see that we are having symptom Meniere's disease in the radar opus, which is the latest version, and you are having the symptom Meniere's disease. You are having these medicines. We'll be describing the medicines in detail. Now, Meniere's disease, ear noises accompanied by, then vertigo lying down. You can see vertigo lying down aggravation. Then vertigo turning well. This is the most common symptom which we get in our OTDs. Tinnitus after. Then vertigo motion aggravation. Okay. So here I'll be mentioning some medicines which are frequently indicated. So first and foremost important, even though I have thought it like conium in my early days of practice, but later it was found to Pulsatilla, which was found to be more effective. Here I am mentioning the auditory symptoms alone, because all the other general symptoms, as you all know, it will be a repetition of Metrium Medica. So I'm not mentioning it here. The general symptoms, what's the constitution of Pulsatilla, what are the physical generals, and see. What I want to show you is here there is tinnitus, there is vertigo, both the symptoms are there. In our patients, we have observed hearing impairment also. All the auditory symptoms, under auditory symptoms, the hearing impairment is not mentioned here in our Metrium Medica. But in our patients, we have seen Pulsatilla patients with hearing impairment and improving after Pulsatilla. And conium, the very important remedy for conium, especially during the acute attacks of vertigo, is a very helpful remedy. We can give it as SOS for these patients also. Whenever the patient is turning or lying down, that spinning particular sensation is there, you can go for conium, and it is a keynote prescription. And sulfur, the great antisoric, and here you're having the tinnitus is there, hearing impairment is there, along with that vertigo is also there. Here the triad is fixed. Now Natromure also you can have vertigo, hearing impairment, buzzing, along with that you will be having that headache. So you can think of Natromure in all those cases of Meniere's disease which are having headache. And another important remedy for such kind of Meniere's disease is Scoculus. Scoculus, we will be having the headache especially in the basi-occipital region, unlike that of Natromure, which is in the temporal region. Now, another very important remedy is phosphorus. In phosphorus, what we have seen is like, apart from the general symptoms, you all know what's the constitution of phosphorus, what are the general symptoms and all. The auditory symptom, hearing impairment, which is very prominent in phosphorus. It is a very important medicine for hearing impairment. Then causticum and phosphorus, they are inimical remedies because they are very similar in their presentation. And you can see the vertigo is there, the tinnitus is there, and hearing impairment is there. It is a very important remedy, and we have a good proportion of causticum patients with Meniere's disease treated with causticum. Meniere's disease patients treated with causticum. Next is calcareous. We may not think of calcareous in Meniere's, but it is also very important. You see the symptoms of Meniere's are clearly written in our literature, and even though it is not mentioned like Meniere's, we are having all the symptoms. Since we are looking for the totality of symptoms, when we are repetizing, this calcareous is coming sometimes, and if every other symptoms are fitting into the puzzle, you can definitely choose calcareous.